Hello everyone and welcome to another episode or podcast episode of Product Coalition, the Melbourne Series. It's great to get going on the second podcast in this series. Today I want to give a shout out first of all to Proud Mary Coffee. Proud Mary is a specialty coffee roaster, cafe, coffee educator and retailer based in Melbourne, Australia and Portland in Oregon, USA. I'm personally fortunate to help out with Proud Mary and their story. So a big thanks to all of the Proud Mary coffee team here in Melbourne and over in the US. To find out more about Proud Mary, if you're in Oz, visit proudmarycoffee.com.au or proudmarycoffee.com in the US. Personally, I recommend actually get down to the cafe if you can, over in Portland or in Collingwood here in Australia. And my top tip off the menu is the potato hash. I'm really excited to have Brad Dunn joining me. Me and Brad have been connected a little while through Product Coalition as a community. We're going to smash through 4 fast topics in under 40 minutes. We're going to go a bit all over the place with our thinking and talking. So try and keep up. But firstly, thank you, Brad, for joining me. I know you've jumped off a flight pretty late last night.
Thanks for having me, yeah.
Could you mind just kicking us off? Give us a bit of your background, how you got to where you are in product.
Get into product, yeah. I feel like product managers always have these weird origin stories. But I guess for me, you know, I really had to work out how to build software when we started a digital agency called Nazori about in 2010, I think. And as part of that, you know, I started working with the creative team, working out how to build software, and then you start to think, well, what's kind of the right way of doing this? And I sort of got exposed to some, I was sort of lucky enough to have this guy called Scott Tong, who I'd met at a family barbecue in San Francisco, and he was a designer at IDEO at the time, and he went on to start If This Then That.
Wow.
Yeah, and I think when he started it, I think it was If This Then That was very small. They were kind of running out of money, and I didn't know what it meant at the time. And and he'd sort of, you know, kind of said, you know, you should check out how IDEO builds software and how they think about users and problems and stuff. And that sort of sent me on this kind of journey of just reading as much as I could about it. And we sort of took that back into the business and then started to try and change the way we were building software and that sort of thing. And then, that was great. It was super fun. I really enjoyed it, having that business. And then we went on to, took some other product management roles on and then ended up as a head of product for this publicly listed company. And that was kind of a bit of a journey. And so it's kind of led me to more product roles, which kind of do today. And that's kind of it, really, how I got into it.
Cool. And you're Melbourne born and bred?
No, I'm actually from Perth. So, moved out about 10 years ago. Actually, Proud Mary's was probably one of the first places I ever went.
Right, okay.
When I first came to Melbourne. So seeing what coffee could be like was pretty good. And the potato hash is excellent, I must say. Yeah.
It's up there for you as well?
Yeah.
Good. All right, let's get going on some Melbourne questions. What and you don't have to say Proud Mary.
Sure.
Favourite tea or coffee joint in Melbourne?
Oh, that's a good question. Tea, I would have to say Kura in North Melbourne. They do amazing tea. And I actually probably drink more tea than I do coffee these days. But if I drink coffee, I'll actually probably come here, like to Auntie Peg's downstairs. It's pretty rare for me to come out for coffee these days.
Cool. And for lunch in the CBD, what's your favourite?
Oh, lunch in the CBD. I think Masak is pretty good.
Right.
It's like a
style.
It's like a Malaysian, Indonesian. It's like Papa Rich's, but a bit more ghetto.
Okay.
Something like that. Yeah, that's probably what I'd say.
Cool. Favourite tram route?
Oh, the 86, no doubt.
Where's that go from?
Goes from Collingwood to, I don't know where the other side, but it's a real rite of passage, catching the 86 at night, seeing if you can survive.
You get off before you get to the river and go south of the river?
Yeah, I don't know where I always catch. I mean, it gets me home. That's how I know it, yeah.
Awesome. What's your favourite product or just general meetup or conference in Melbourne?
I'm really bad with this stuff. Like I think historically, because I've always had startups and been broke perpetually, and then like going from like full-time employment to actually, so I've always been like, I should just be home reading a book or working on the product. And I've always looked at that, like going to conferences as a bit of a extracurricular activity that I didn't justify the time. But every time I have, it's been good. Like I've been to a few of the Product Anonymous ones. They've been really good.
Cool. Cool. And favourite suburb?
Fitzroy, of course. Collingwood down here. It's great.
It's all north of Melbourne CBD for anyone who wants to visit Melbourne. Okay, let's get stuck into it. So we've got four fast topics is what we're going to try and smash through all around the world of product. So the first one, Brad, talking about startups, when should one become two?
Oh, like in team size. Yeah, this is a bit of a personal obsession of mine. I think it's a really hard question. Like I'm not even sure there is a right answer, but like I work in a team of 13 at the moment, which is quite big. And yeah, I think there's sort of this. One of the things I've been thinking about this week is we have these Zoom calls and we have some remote staff and things like that. And you can see like 13 faces on the board. And I think when you sort of start to see that you could kind of draw a line around some of the stuff and you go, well, they're all talking about this mobile app, right? And these guys are all talking about this API. And so you sort of think in those retros and stand-ups, you got these people that are listening to other people talk about things that have nothing to do with them or that they so I think that's sort of when you start to think, well, what if we split these in half and then gave each one kind of a really clear remit, set some OKRs or something, and then just kind of get out of their way. I think that's probably when you need to think about team size. But I had to sort of put a bit of a case together for the business I'm at the moment. And I was like, I wonder if there is a perfect team size. And it turns out it's fairly well studied. Like there's this thing called, I came across this thing called the Ringelmann effect, which is, it's like super nerdy product psych stuff, right? But this guy had,
Mr. Ringelmann?
Yeah, Mr. Ringelmann. He sets up this experiment. I think it's a Ringelmann. And he gets someone to pull on a rope, right? So I give you the rope and I say, Jay, pull the rope and you put in maximum amount of effort, right? So you contribute a huge amount of effort. And then what happens is we put a second person on the rope, right? And we say, well, how much effort are you now going to pull? And what happens is you actually pull a little bit less, right? And then you put a third person on the rope, and what happens is you pull a little bit less again. And it's sort of this linear line. And so it's sort of this case to be made, well, the more people on a team, less individual effort they're going to pull. And then I thought this was really interesting. And then I came across this other stuff. There was another publication, I think it was the HBR, and there was one in Science as well. And they give teams a bunch of tasks, and they seemingly, dull tasks, and they say, at the end of the task, did you feel your team was too big, the right size, or too small? And you end up drawing this histogram, and they kind of dial into this sort of like 4.6 number. Now, obviously, a team size of exactly 4.6 is ridiculous, but it's kind of interesting, like seeing that there is some kind of research about bigger team sizes and things get a bit less less productive. And that's kind of a long-winded answer, but
no. The other answer could have been 2 pizzas.
Yeah, well, that's sort of how it came about. It's like, how do you become a 2-pizza team? Yep. And I think it's sort of, it's very hard to make that first split. And in some ways, it requires someone to really let go a little bit too, because when you say, we're going to put these people into autonomous teams, someone really has to have the courage to say, I'm comfortable with that, and that's very hard for a lot of people.
Yep. Okay, let's shift gears. Basecamp.
Yes.
I know you got some thoughts on what's been coming out and tweeted about from the Basecamp side.
Yeah, I just think everyone...
Talk us through it.
Yeah, everyone I bump into lately is talking about this Shapeup book, which is great. I think it's Ryan. Is it Ryan Singer or something who wrote it? I forget his name. But there's some really interesting stuff in there. So, I've been talking to different product managers about what they like about some of the things that are in the book. So they've come up with this... the 2 things I really took away from it was, one, I think product managers are notoriously, you talk about backlogs, right? Everyone's got a backlog with all this stuff in it. And I think what came out of that Shapeup book was it's a tremendous amount of anxiety to look at a backlog, right? Because it's all this stuff you have to do. And everyone knows you have to do more stuff, but just the sheer list of it gives everyone this sense of anxiety. And I think when everyone read that, they went, yeah, that's so true. Like it's all these things you don't have time to build, you don't have the resources to build. So they've kind of said, well, we're just not going to do that. And they just say, well, good ideas will just bubble up to the table. And I think that really spoke to a lot of product managers out there And they've always had a bit of a like kind of sanctimonious approach to like to pretty much everything. Some of which I agree with, but yeah, I think that really spoke to people. And also the second thing I really liked, and it's something we're actually using at the moment, is these hill charts that they do. I don't know if you've seen them.
No.
Yeah, so you ask any cross-functional team, you say, when's this feature going to be ready? And they go, 3 weeks or 2 weeks or whatever, which is all wrong usually. So they've said, well, we're not going to do that. So they draw these hill charts. And if you imagine, when you're coming up the hill, you're kind of like working out the details. Like you don't know what to do yet. So what they do is they kind of, let's say the feature is we want to build a new report. You have a little circle on the hill chart and you say, well, we're sort of halfway up. So we're halfway to working out what we need to do. And then when you get over the hill, it's all delivery. We know exactly what we're going to do. It's just kind of like, this is all the delivery stuff. So when people say, where are you at? How long is this going to take? They'll visualize all the features on this hill chart.
Right.
And so it's a good kind of visual artifact for management. It says, well, we don't really know what we're doing yet. Because what happens is if you create tickets to deliver something, you end up creating more tickets on the way as you learn. You're like, oh, okay, we're going to do this as well. So if you're just looking at we've done 7 out of the 10 tasks, it's kind of a really tricky way to know how far along you are really in the progress. So I like those two elements. I mean, there's other things that Basecamp do that I kind of don't necessarily, I haven't always really gelled with. Like I know they don't set goals, which I sort of wonder if it's very true, because if they had a business, surely not going broke is probably a goal. Not losing staff is probably a goal. They might look at that pretty differently, but yeah, I think there's some great stuff in this book, and I know they're refining it as well. So they asked for some feedback, and I had spoken to the author on Twitter a little bit about it, and we actually spoke a bit about team sizes, because I think one thing I've always been curious about is their org design, right? So like, how many teams do they have? What do those teams work on? What's the genetic makeup of each team? And he sort of came back to me and he said, we've got, I think it's like they have a team of 3 on the front end. They have 2 teams of 3 or something like that. So I think some of those details will come out. It sounds like they'll probably publish the book in a bit more detail. I think they're kind of going to collect some feedback from the public and go from there.
Okay.
So
you mentioned earlier about using a visual system to share progress. What's your thoughts on digital displays of where we're at? So
I like gecko boards and stuff like that.
Or just to share the size of a backlog or a board versus physical boards and printed material. Have you got any preference?
I don't know. Yeah, I mean, I think like I took I took a team out to Seek one day, and we went and met with one of their high performing teams. I took some product managers and designers.
Seek,
out there.
for anyone listening overseas, HR. National HR platform, seek.com.au here in Australia.
Yeah. And I think that was the first time I'd ever been somewhere where the physical printed out kind of agile boards was sort of was so prevalent, and I actually found that really great. Like they had all, it was just all these really interesting things on a wall, and I was like, oh, this is really cool. But yeah, I've typically always just kind of used digital boards and things like that. I don't really have any.
Cool. Let's jump into interviewing product managers.
Yeah.
Tell me about some experiences you've had or lessons learned.
Yes. I have this one interview I did, which has been quite memorable. So last year we started a business called Ono, which was my brother and I. And before that, I was interviewing at Google for a job in Sydney to work on the Google Maps team, and it was hands down the hardest thing I've ever done in my entire life. But it was amazing. Like it was such an amazing experience, and I kind of walked away from it thinking that's a really great way of interviewing. And so they did this really interesting thing where they interviewed me in isolation. So if you and I were interviewing someone and I kind of get a bit of a sense you're not really into them, I kind of pick up on that vibe and it might influence the way I feel. So they kind of interview you in isolation, and they score you. So I think it's like, don't hire, reluctantly don't hire, that kind of stuff. So you get scored on these 4 metrics. And then, which I liked in itself. And then the second thing was they score you on these attributes. So it's like creative, analytical, strategic, Googliness. And the idea is they ask you these questions, these puzzles, right? Which is And so I get this big pack, and I had a couple of weeks to kind of prep for the interview, and then they they give you these puzzles, right? Which some were good. The creative ones I was really into, and the analytical ones just really hurt my brain. I'm a high school dropout, that kind of stuff, and then I had to learn how to do these like long form mathematical kind of what they call Fermi estimations, and my first interview really coached me on that. She was a woman in Shanghai, and she said, just get really good at these Fermi estimations. And if you've never done them before, it's basically like trying to work out how many grains of sand on a beach, how many roads in a country, that kind of stuff. And which sort of makes sense because if you think about like Gmail or something like that, one of the example questions they give you is, how many queries does Gmail do in a second, that sort of stuff. And so, I was getting really good at these. I spent 2 weeks, really practicing. I was like, how many coffee beans in a cafe, how many walnuts in a forest, and I was like getting real good. My wife was constantly like just throwing these things in me in the kitchen and stuff. I was getting real good. And then, so my first one was really good. My first question was like, design a fridge for a blind person. I think I did pretty well with that. And then the second one, I was getting ready for these like Fermi estimations, and I was expecting a very short question. And then this guy gives me this question that was about 5.5 minutes long, and I just was caught totally off guard by the length of this and seemingly unrelated, bits of information. And so the question was basically, I'll paraphrase it, but it was, a piece of technology comes out overnight, and it makes all of car transport totally obsolete. Your job as a private business is to like buy back the roads, come up with a solution to use them, and work out how much money you're going to make from the solution. So all I had was, I got to work out how many roads there are on planet Earth. And I was like, this is 3-dimensional. I wasn't prepared for this. And I'm trying to do these like long form Fermi estimations on a whiteboard. And you get like 3 puzzles in 15 minutes. And yeah, it was amazing. I've told some other product managers that story. I think some of them wake up late at night with sweats and stuff.
Yeah.
But I think not coming from an engineering background or a mathematics background, I think was probably the big thing for me. So I think, if you're good at like I've asked engineers this question, and they seem to just like go, oh yeah, you just like break it down and that's how you do it. And I think probably that's the bit that that I didn't quite do too well on. But the process was just great because they're not asking you these really oddball questions. They're sort of like, well, here's a general question about creativity. Here's a general question about strategy. And so they're kind of just testing that without, it's great. It's a really great process, and you go online. There's heaps of YouTube videos about the interview, and it's fantastic. I would almost copy everything about it if I was interviewing product managers today.
Where would you start then with that? What's the first thing you're going to change about interviewing, let's say, your next product manager? Yeah,
I think I would work out those attributes, like the googliness, the strategic bit, like whatever those things are that are important to the organization. And then I would just kind of come up with some questions that demonstrate that. That's probably where I'd start. And I also like the isolation thing. I think like I've been in lots of rooms where you get 3 or 4 people, and I think there's probably too much bias coming into the room. And so I think what they do is, I'm sort of inferring this. I don't know 100%, but I think what happens is like if you get some scores that are like reluctantly higher, some that are like absolutely higher, some that don't higher. I think they look for more consistent scores. So as you go through the process and you meet more people, I think what they're looking for is variance, and they're trying to kind of make sure that everyone's got a consistent message. And I'm told that they put together this big pack. I'm sure someone from Google can probably break this down better than I can. But that's probably the 2 things I'd take away.
Fantastic. All right, let's change directions again. Next topic is building weapons grade data sets.
Yeah, this is something
not any other grade, weapons grade data sets.
So this is I used this term a couple of times a few weeks ago, and people thought it was quite amusing, but it's not something I came up with. I saw it on this documentary about Cambridge Analytica. So it's both an apt description of what some people are trying to do, but also quite a nefarious description for it. But it's interesting because like I'm a bit of a data and analytics nerd. Like I quite like attribution data, like being really good in all the tools. And so like it's a project I'm working on at the moment is to really build out this this attribution database using Segment. So we'll kind of, build out all the stuff for the analytics tools. But yeah, it's kind of like most companies I've come into contact with, that analytics layer is always a bit odd. It's always a bit complicated. The data's not very organized, and I think just having that saves a huge amount of time. So if you can see the same events in in Mixpanel or Amplitude and Intercom and HubSpot, then it's just kind of a consistent message. Everywhere you're looking is the same. All the different teams see the same amount of information. But I think in practice, what I see is like a lot of different tools. All the data is kind of different. So no one trusts the data. So you can't make good decisions based on it. So you sort of have to get that sort of quote unquote weapons grade data set kind of in place. And then all the decisions you're making are really good. So you take Intercom, right? You want to send a life cycle message to new users to make sure that they're adopting the features and they kind of know what's going on. I think if you can make sure that you've got really good attributes and events that you can send those messages on, you can sort of really target those users with those needs specifically. So if I think about Spotify, right? So I get a message from Spotify every now and then that says, here are these bands that have got concerts near you, but it's all based on these attributes that they know about me, the albums I listen to. So it's useful, right? So even though it's probably not good to use military grade terms, right? Which is never good, right? Front lines, weapons grade, but it's kind of a bit of an apt description, I think sometimes. But yeah, I think it's really important to get that stuff sorted out early on, just in teams.
So do you see the tool being the single version of truth, or the data that might sit behind the tool being the single version of truth?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if there's. I've only ever used Segment. To be honest, like to store this stuff now. I often wonder whether, I'm sure there are competitors to that product.
How's using that tool changed things for you? That you couldn't do before? Yeah,
so I think like in the past, I've seen a bunch of user attributes in Intercom, right? So this person they're part of this persona, they have this name, they're on this payment plan. And then something changes over the years, like they swap from 0 to MyOb or something like that. And suddenly all that data in Intercom it's still there, still looks like they're on plan number 3, but it's wrong.
Right.
So the value of Segment is you can kind of put all this stuff inside of it, and then you can make sure that, all of those attributes are kind of correct all the time. Now, obviously someone's going to have to build a connection between the database and Segment and get all that stuff sorted out.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it just gives you confidence in the data. Like I like to look at the data and know that what I'm seeing is true, and I can kind of make good decisions around that stuff. Because otherwise you just spin in circles. You're in meetings and everyone's got sort of an interpretation of the data that's based on some single event that they've seen. Oh no, that's not true because I spoke to this client who said that wasn't true. So I think just getting that stuff really organized is important.
Interesting. I know last year I personally built out some reporting in Tableau. And jumping in and building out a set of reports for myself was really, a unique thing for learning the absolute back end on the product and really getting the most from a data perspective to inform me how the tool is really used down at the lowest level data attribute sort of piece. Do you build your own reports? Do you enjoy it when people, you rather have someone build out reports for you?
Well, the company I'm at the moment is called Rate It, and we have like a whole extensive reporting suite about customer feedback and stuff like that. So they have some pretty comprehensive reporting that they'll build for customers inside the dashboard. But in terms of the product side, I would always use. I tend to use Mixpanel for all of the data reporting that I need. But mostly because it's just kind of what I know how to use now. Like I think it's in Rate It use Amplitude. So I'm actually keen to just kind of check it out and see what the differences is. But I'll use that for kind of the quantitative stuff. So if I want to crunch numbers like percentages of users, retention numbers, that sort of thing, I'll use something like Mixpanel. And then Full Story is kind of the qualitative, let's like creepily watch videos of users stumbling through the product. That's always super fun in the mornings to do.
Right, okay.
yeah, I kind of lean on those tools probably the most.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Fantastic. This has been good fun.
Yeah, this has been great. Thank you so much for having
We
me.
smashed through the 4 topics in well under 40 minutes, which is good.
It's awesome.
Let's do this again.
Absolutely. Thanks
All
for
right.
having me.
Thanks. Cheers, Brad.
Bye.
Thanks everyone for listening. Thanks to Brad Dunn for jumping on in this episode. Thanks again to Proud Mary for hosting us from a location perspective today, and look forward to sharing some more product people stories with you all again soon. Thank you.